Chapter 48. The Blight. Lord Agamar had assigned 100 lances led by Ingtar to escort the group to the border of Malkier in case they were attacked by a Trolloc raid. Rand saw the watchtowers growing closer all morning, half a mile from each other and built upon the hills. Broad-walled ramps spiralled around each stone structure. It offered protection to any sortie until they reached the ground, while allowing archers and boiled oil access to any attacker. Large steel mirrors sat at the top that could be angled into the sun to signal to the other towers or Faldara. The soldiers at the closest towers watched the group in curiosity. They were a skeleton of the usual contingent, as most were heading to Tarwin's Gap. If the army failed, the loss of these towers would matter little to Shienar. From what Rand could see, the land across the border didn't look any different to Shienar, though he knew somewhere beyond the leafless trees lay the Blight. Ingtar halted the column just short of the nearest tower, then begged the pardon of the group. He'd been ordered by Lord Agamar to go no further, in a disgruntled voice. Moraine told him that was her order, not just Agamar's. Ingtar apologised, but didn't sound sincere to Rand. Then he explained that escorting them meant he would not be able to reach the gap before the fight began. He doesn't understand the order, as he's been in the Blight many times before. Matt muttered that he could take his place, earning a sharp look off Lan, and the boy lowered his eyes. Moraine told the Lord that everyone has their place in the pattern, but from here they must thread theirs alone. Ingtar bowed stiffly, then told her that if he leaves now and rides hard, they may arrive in time to be allowed to fight the Trollocs. Nynaeve asked if he really was that eager to fight Trollocs, and was rewarded with a puzzled look off the Lord. He looked to Lan as if the warder could explain it to her, then said,
"That is what I do, lady. That is why I am. Suravya Ninto Manshima Taishit Daishan. Peace favour your sword."
Ingtar wheeled the escort east and rode off as Egwene asked why the Shienarans used the word peace as they do. Lan told her,
"When you have never known a thing except a dream, it becomes more than a talisman."
As the group rode over the border, Rand turned to watch Ingtar and his men disappear into the distance. They passed through the leafless forest, and he became lost in memory of their departure from Faldara that morning. At dawn, Lord Agamar was armoured like his men, who flew the Black Hawk banners along with the Lord's personal sigil, the 3 foxes. His column rode through the east gate towards the gap, kettle drums pounding and winding away like a steel snake. Agamar's column would meet up with those from Fal Moran, led by King Ezer and his sons. The cities of Angkor Dyle in the eastern marches, Mos Shirai, Fal Sion, Camron Khan, and many other fortresses in Shienar, great and small. No one in the city cheered as the second exodus occurred at the same time, with the citizens using the King's Gate, driving their livestock toward the capital and hopefully safety. When their eyes set upon the soldiers, they would mutter prayers to the light for the army and themselves. Ingtar had led their group through the Malkier Gate, and by the day's end only a fort guard of older soldiers would remain, so that Faldara would not fall undefended. After an hour past the border, Rand wondered when they would ever reach the Blight. The hills had become steeper, but the land looked unchanged. He began to feel warm enough to sling his cloak over his saddle, as Egwene remarked that this was the best weather she'd seen all year. Nynaeve was frowning as she said it felt wrong, and Rand nodded. He felt the same, but he couldn't say how. It went beyond the warmth. By noon the men had unbuttoned their coats, Matt's dagger now visible as he wiped his forehead with his scarf. Nynaeve and Egwene were fanning themselves, riding slumped and wilting in the heat. Loyal had his shirt unbuttoned, revealing a strip of hair like fur down his chest, and apologised for it. His steading is in the mountains, and he's not used to this heat and damp. He doesn't like it. The damp reminded Rand of the mire back home, a boggy swamp where every breath felt like hot water soaked in wool. Perrin and Lan seemed unaffected though, both still fully dressed and breathing easily. Rand saw that some of the trees now had leaves and reached out to touch one, pulling back when he saw it was a sickly yellow mottled red and black. Lan told him in a flat tone that he'd warned them not to touch anything. Flowers in the Blight can kill, and its leaves maim. There's a little insect called a stick that hides in the leaves and waits to be touched. Its bite releases juices that digest the victim alive, and the only thing to save you is to amputate the limb. Perrin asked if they were in the Blight now, and Lan replied that this is the fringe. The real Blight is still to come. There are creatures that hunt by sound within it, though some wander this far south and others to the north across the mountains of doom, so keep quiet. Mile by mile the corruption became more apparent. The leaves grew thicker but mottled, bloated, ready to burst at the slightest touch. Flowers hung on the trees, a parody of spring, sickly, pale and waxy. Rand breathed through his nose. The stench of decay sickened him, but when he breathed through his mouth he would gag. It tasted like spoiled meat. The horse's hooves squelched as ripe, rotten things broke underfoot. Matt leaned out of his saddle and vomited until his stomach was empty, though he kept heaving long afterwards. Rand sought the void, but its calm was little help against the bile in his throat. Egwene kept swallowing while Nynaeve had her jaw clenched. She would not admit to feeling ill until the Aes Sedai did. Rand didn't think she'd have to wait long. Moraine's eyes were tight and lips pale. Despite the heat, Loyal wrapped a scarf around his face, and with outrage in his eyes he told Rand,
I had heard. It tastes like... I had read about the Blight, but nothing could describe that the Dark One could do this to trees.
Perrin was still as unaffected as the warder, though he kept touching his axe as he scanned the area, half growling in a way that raised Rand's neck hair. Even in the sun, Perrin's yellow eyes glowed golden and fierce. The sweat on Rand's head flashed to ice in the cold wind that blew down from the mountains that emerged ahead, then would melt and run down his face again. The wind carried the scent of a newly opened tomb, barely better than the smell of the rot. Lan told them that they can't reach the mountains by nightfall, and it's dangerous to travel in the Blight in the dark. Moraine said there is a suitable spot not far off. It'll be a good omen. They shared a look with each other, and the warder agreed. It may as well be there. Moraine told the group, The Eye of the World was beyond the high passes when I found it. Better to cross the mountains of doom in full daylight at noon, when the Dark One's powers in this world are weakest. Egwene said that she spoke as if the eye isn't always in the same place, but it was Loyal that explained, that no two Ogier have ever found it in the same place. The Green Man is found where he is needed, but it is always beyond the high passes, which are treacherous and haunted by creatures of the Dark One. Lan told them that they'll have to get to them first. They'll truly be in the Blight tomorrow. Rand couldn't believe the vileness that surrounded them was not the true Blight. Lan led them west as the sun began to sink, and they crested a hill revealing a network of lakes glittering in the light. Further in the distance stood the broken remnants of 7 towers, and Rand saw that the warder had his face set like stone. Nynaeve asked if they could camp nearer the lakes. It must be cooler by the water. Matt agreed and said he wanted to plunge his face into one. As if on cue, something roiled under the water at the nearest lake, and fat tentacles writhing like worms rose 5 spans into the air, then sank until only ripples remained. The boys exchanged horrified looks, and Matt quipped that he was fine with where they were. Moraine said that she would set a guiding ward around the hill. A true barrier would call attention, but if any creature of the Dark One comes within a mile, she will know it. Matt joked that he would prefer a barrier if it kept the creature out, but was silenced by Egwene and Nynaeve, who said that he's a fool. They would have creatures waiting for them in the morning otherwise. Rand and Perrin shared a grin. For a moment it had felt like home having the women chiding Matt. Then Rand's smile slipped when he caught the yellow glint in Perrin's eyes. It wasn't like home at all. Loyal helped the women set up the camp while the boys aided Lan with the horses. As Rand unpacked the bulging water bags, he no longer wondered on Lan's insistence for them. He turned to take them to the camp and found it was gone. He fumbled with his sword and Perrin had his axe ready, as Matt stood cursing. Lan muttered,
Sheep herders,
as he walked past them, then disappeared after a few steps. The boys exchanged a shocked look, then darted to follow the warder, skidding to a stop at the sight of the camp. Moraine saw them gaping and explained it was a trick of Ben's in the light. They will not be seen by what prowls the Blight. Egwene's eyes shone as she told Rand that Moraine thought she might be able to do it. She can handle enough of the One Power for it now. The Aes Sedai cautioned her that she must have training first. The simplest thing with the One Power can be dangerous to the untrained and those around them. Perrin snorted and Egwene looked so uncomfortable that Rand wondered if she'd been trying her abilities already. Nynaeve told Egwene, When you go to Tar Valon, perhaps I will go with you. In a defensive tone to Moraine, she said it would be good for the girl to have a familiar face, someone other than Aes Sedai to advise her. Moraine agreed that it would be for the best, and Egwene clapped happily, then asked Rand to come with them, then added the other boys to her invitation. Perrin and Matt didn't answer, but she took it as an agreement. They can all be together. Rand thought that a man could drown in her eyes and be happy for it, then cleared his throat in embarrassment. He asked if they have any need for shepherds in Tar Valon, but Moraine told him she can find him something more interesting to do. Egwene took it as settled and then said, I know! I will make you my warder when I'm an Aes Sedai. You would like being my warder, wouldn't you? My warder? Rand could see in her eyes that she needed an answer, and he replied,
I'd like being your warder.
Min's words ran through his mind. She's not for you or you for her, and wished he didn't know it. They began to settle into sleep, made tolerable by something the Aes Sedai put in the burning oil to dispel the stench. Rand still struggled with the thickness of the air and fear of dreams despite Moraine laying nearby. He lay awake and noticed Lan sat watching the night. Nynaeve was awake too. She poured her tea, then brought it to the warder, kneeling next to him. When he thanked her, she didn't let go of the cup and said, "I should have known you would be a king." Her voice trembled, but she held Lan's eyes steadily, and his face seemed to soften. He told her that he's not a king, just a man with less to his name than a farmer. The wisdom told him, "Some women don't ask for land or gold, just the man." Lan replied,
"And the man who would ask her to accept so little would not be worthy of her. You are a remarkable woman, as beautiful as the sunrise, as fierce as a warrior. You are a lioness, Wisdom."
"A wisdom seldom weds, but if I go to Tar Valon, it may be that I will be something other than a wisdom." Lan told her that Aes Sedai seldom wed either. Few men can cope with their wife having so much power, dimming them with their radiance whether she means to or not. Nynaeve said that there are some men strong enough. She knows one. Her look left little doubt to who she meant.
"All I have is a sword and a war I cannot win, but can never stop fighting,"
she snapped. "I've told you I care nothing for that. Light! You've made me say more than is proper already. Will you shame me to the point of asking you?" In a gentle tone that shocked Rand, Lan told her,
"I will never shame you. I will hate the man you chose because he is not me, and love him if he makes you smile. No woman deserves the sure knowledge of widow's black as her bride price, you least of all."
He put the cup back on the ground and said he had to check the horses, disappearing through the ward. Nynaeve stayed kneeling, and Rand closed his eyes. The wisdom wouldn't want him to see her crying.
Thanks for listening. Please like, share and subscribe and help get a new channel off the ground. Thank you.